Hello everyone, and welcome back as usual. We continue to speak about the metaphysical poets, or as I prefer to call them, the John Donne school of poetry. Because again, the term metaphysical was used by the critics of John Donne and his followers as a term of abuse. Not to praise them, not even to describe them, but to insult them, to abuse them, to negatively frame them and present them, introduce them negatively to the readers. And as a matter of fact, many people, even today, dislike John Donne's poetry, not because of John Donne or because of something his poetry does, but generally because we are framed. When we read books, anthologies, about literature, when we read an introduction into John Donne before reading his poetry, what he did, what he didn't do, we come across things I mentioned last time. From Ben Jonson, John Dryden, Samuel Johnson, and Alexander Pope. And I have to go through them just to show you how serious this act of framing and censorship is. How one poet who writes differently can easily be kicked outside the canon because in a way he could be a threat. So we have Ben Jonson saying, John Donne deserved hanging. That's very tough, very extreme. And that he would perish for not being understood. It's funny here that the critics of this time, 17th and 18th century, those who came during the time of Donne and after Donne, they appointed themselves as the spokespeople for all readers around the world. So when he says, for not being understood, John Donne would perish, he's speaking for us. And then we say, wait a minute. Don't speak for us. We read his poetry. We enjoy his poetry. It's lovely. It's different, at least. And then we have Dryden who says, John Donne, this is worse because John Dryden appoints himself as the speaker for women. And he assumes that women will not be able to understand John Donne's poetry. And he says, John Donne perplexes, confuses the minds of the fair sex, of the women. And it's funny how he uses the term fair sex. In a way, he's accusing John Donne of being anti-feminist, I think, writing stuff so he can confuse women. But because we are smart, we don't take things for granted. We say, okay, Dryden, just wait a minute, calm down. First of all, you're not a woman. You shouldn't be speaking for women. Second of all, why are you assuming that women are not smart? Why are you assuming that women will not be able to understand this kind of poetry? You are anti-feminist, not John Donne. And indeed, and we saw this, John Donne's poetry gives voice to the voiceless, to the women. John Donne's poetry empowers women. Their presence in the poetry is crucial. We discussed, we mentioned two examples from two poems by Donne. Number one, the Flea, remember? The woman doesn't speak exactly like the woman in Marlowe, but she is present, she's active. When Donne says, you, I, and the Flea are one, so let's get together, she's like, and she kills the Flea. She acts, she does the most important thing. She outsmarts the poet in a way or another. And in Forbidding Morning, another poem, when John Donne likens the relationship to a stiff twin compasses. Remember the conceit? Very important conceit. Stiff twin compasses. We see the woman as the fixed, the firm foot. The woman holds this relationship together. The woman is the essence, the core. She's not marginalized here. She is very strong, very powerful. So again, see what I mean by framing here. When you read this, John Donne affects the metaphysics and perplexes the minds of the fair sex. We could have a negative idea about John Donne. And that's why my advice, always read what writers write, not what people write about them. Go face to face with people. Experience things for yourself, because framing is everywhere. People talk about people. Books talk about things. And I said this many times. This book, for example, contains a lot of the thing we described as whitewashing. Remember?
Yes.
and censorship. For example, remember what whitewashing means? To represent something in a positive way. So here there is a lot of colonialism, imperialism. And when we speak about the English colonialism and imperialism, we speak about the destruction of whole nations. The massacres that took the lives, claimed the lives of millions and millions of people. But what does the book call this? It calls it colonial glory. You know, colonial glory. This is whitewashing. So we're training you in this course to be smart, to think for yourself. Always take a step back, and when you read a story, when you read something, ask yourself 3 important questions. Whether this is a story, an article, or a text. Who is telling the story? Who is telling the story? That's question number 1. Who is the storyteller? You need to understand the storyteller, the speaker here. Is he English? Is he white? A woman? A man? Number 2, who benefits from the story? Who does the story help? Which people, generally? This or that? The English people, the Irish people, the Scottish people, Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, Muslims, non-Muslims. And then, more importantly, who is missing from the story? This applies to stories in particular, to books, to poems, everywhere. Because when I write a story, when I tell you a story, if something wrong happens here, takes place, somebody breaks something, I'm sure we have like 30 of you here. When I ask you to tell me what happens, what has happened, I'll have 30 stories. Some of you weren't paying attention, some of you didn't see everything, some of you were sitting there far away in the back, but some of you have, the benefit from this, or they don't. So your friend did it, so you just try to cover up for her. Or someone you don't like did it, so you try to expose her, to just point the finger of accusation. We all do this, and it happens at our homes all the time. When kids fight, they do trouble, they make, as they always do everywhere. We can never know who's to blame. They're always fighting. When you talk to Ali, for example, Ali, what's going on? Why are you shouting? Why are you fighting with Muhammad? He did this. Muhammad, why did you do that? Because he first did something. And it goes on a vicious circle, non-ending. You never know who did what first. And kids do this all the time, but grown-ups, countries, that's why many people say major conflicts around the world are conflicts on narrative. Like Palestine. Palestine belongs to the Palestinians. But the Zionist movement did a lot and paid a lot of money and billions of money, of dollars and stuff, just to change the narrative, to present Palestine as a land without a people. A land that was empty, that belonged to those people and now belongs to their grandsons and daughters. Narrative is very important. We have to be careful who telling us what, who benefits, and who is missing. Okay? So here, John Donne is being negatively framed. Now, Samuel Johnson says John Donne uses a combination of dissimilar images. His poetry is like there is a poem about love, but why is God here in the poem? Or a poem about God, religion, but why is love language there? Why does he use, a stiff twin compasses? What is, a geometrical device? What is it doing here in this? But again, remember, this is John Donne bringing new imagery, original imagery. He doesn't want to imitate. He doesn't want to say, oh, you and I are like a rose and its petals. Because this has been said many times. And finally, no matter what those critics said about John Donne, they all agreed that John Donne was smart, was witty, a genius. He had this sharp wit that makes him different, that makes him bring all these genius conceits and images. However, and again it's funny, Alexander Pope says Don has no imagination. Don has no imagination. And even his wit, it's available for all poets. So even the critics of John Donne do not agree on a particular reason why they should hate. But then we come to the conclusion that it's because they were writing different poetry. They were breaking the rules of decorum. Okay? Today we'll speak about two other metaphysical poets. We mentioned them before, Andrew Marvell and George Herbert. We had an example from George Herbert before, the Easter Wings. Remember that poem with the funny shape? The Easter Wings. But we saw how the length of the line has something to do with its meaning. God who created man in wealth and store, but that man started to lose, decay, etc. Now, one of the most important love poems in the history of English literature, this is a canonical text by Andrew Marvell. And Andrew Marvell, by the way, is double L, not one L, okay? So Andrew Marvell and his poem to his coy mistress, as the name suggests, look at the name, title. You know coy? Coy means shy. So his mistress is shy. And he's addressing her. This poem is addressed to, and she is shy. Typical anti-feminist image that women are shy and timid, not courageous and powerful and everything. And also notice this. He owns her, thank you. It's like the woman is some kind of property, commodity. He owns her to his coy mistress. Now, Andrew Marvell is not 100% purely metaphysical, but he has some metaphysical elements that we can probably trace here. Someone read. Notice the ellipsis here. What does this mean?
There's something deleted.
Dot, dot, dot. It means something deleted in between. This is called ellipsis deletion. Go on, please. You, yes. It's winged, actually, but in poetry, if you see this, it means winged. It adds an extra syllable. And you know why? For the meter. Winged, chariot. Very good. Someone else, please, hint. Winged. Winged. Wing. Winged. Hurrying near. Yes, please.
Had we but word enough and time, this kindness, lady were no cry, but at my back I always have
here.
Wounded, chariot,
hurrying near. I like your musical reading of this. Had we but enough, a world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. It's like titum, 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 titum. That's musical. That's the music of most English poems, by the way. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime, but at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. Finally, yeah, one more.
Had we but more enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime, but I always hear.
Here. Chariot hurrying near. Okay. Now, before we comment on this, the metaphysicality of this poem, what's going on here? Why do we have a verb before the subject? Is this a question? This is called subject-verb inversion, and it happens on three major occasions. One of them is when you ask a question. You say, where are you? What did he? Why does she? So the verb comes before the subject. But we have other occasions where we invert the subject and the verb. We do this generally for emphasis, to emphasize something, true. But what happens grammatically speaking? Grammar. You already studied 2 grammar courses. Okay. So originally this is if we had. should it be had or have? Is this present or past? Because he says present. I always hear. What's going on here? Okay, let's do some grammar. We're studying it, but see how literature also brings vocabulary and expressions and grammar and culture and politics and everything. When we use if, we have several if rules, conditional if, but the major 3 rules are like 1, 2, and 3. In rule number 2 and 3, if1, if2, and 3, when you delete if, you have to invert the subject and the verb. It's not when you delete, actually. If you want to emphasize the statement, a particular sentence in if, you can delete if. But if you do that, you have to invert the subject and change the order of the subject and the word. So in rule number 1, when you say, if I have time, I will help you. This tense, the tense is present. The meaning is present and future. But more important than this, if you use rule number 1, it means this is likely to happen. It's possible. So when you express a possibility using if, you should use rule number 1, generally. So you come, say, do you have a minute? And I say, I'm busy now, but if I have time later, I will help you. If I use this, I'm expressing my willingness to help you. However, rule number 2, if I had enough time or time, I would help you. Listen to me. The tense here is past, but the meaning is still present. Oh, strange. Why? The rule says in English grammar, we sometimes use the past simple to speak about the present, to express impossibility, to say that something is, it's not impossible, unlikely to happen. So this one is likely, and this one is unlikely to happen. There is a strong possibility this could happen. There is a strong possibility this couldn't happen. So you come to me, you tell me, do you have a minute? I say, I'm busy now, but if I had time later, I would help you. Meaning I'm going to be extremely busy, or I'm expressing, unwillingness to help you. So, do you have money? I need to buy something. If I have enough money, I will lend you. If I had enough money, I will lend you. So probably don't count on me that much. And this is where we say the famous expressions, if I were you. Can I be you? No, almost impossible. I can't be you, you are you. And if something is going on in Jerusalem, and you say, someone is telling you, hey, Israeli settlers are storming Al-Aqsa Mosque. And you say, if I were there, I would defend Al-Aqsa. It's unlikely to happen. It's almost impossible because you're here physically, you can't be there. And in this rule, you could delete if. But if you do this, there should be subject. And it's more eloquent, more articulate, and more poetic, and more emphatic, like you said. So, had I more. If I were you, where are you? And listen to this expression, if I were you. In grammar, we don't say I were, say I was. Here we say I were, this is standard English. If you say I was, it's okay, acceptable. But in standard English, it should be I were to express impossibility. Now, if you're talking about something that happened in the past, already and finished, something that happened and finished, you use rule number 3. So this is present, present. The meaning is present, present. The meaning is past. This is, the tense is present. The tense is past. Now, to express impossibility, almost something that is unlikely. So here I say, if I had time yesterday, if I had time yesterday, last night, last week, I would have helped you. Will never happen because the past is the past unless someone invents a time machine. And then it also depends whether they are going to say if I have or if I had. So don't waste your time inventing a time machine, probably. So the poet here is saying, we don't have enough time, but he's a poet. Poets don't say we don't have enough time. He's saying, if we had time. Do we have time? Clearly unlikely. So he's urging her, he's pushing her, he's convincing her. This is another way telling her, come live with me and be my love. But this is a metaphysical poet. He's not just offering her things, he's using the argumentative style. Remember? Metaphysical poets are they argue. When John Donne says, you, I, the flea are one. What? And then he argues how things go. You and I are like a stiff twin compasses. The conceit in the stiff twin compasses. It's unlikely. And then he elaborates in a way and then says, oh, that really makes sense. So if we had enough world and time, this coyness where, again, notice this coyness generally was or is, because this is if. We use where just again to emphasize that that's impossible. This coyness where no crime. Because she is timid, she's shy, she's coy, he's telling her stop being this. We don't have time. And again, notice how the issue of time here as a theme. Remember, in the Renaissance, the poets were obsessed with time. Time was destructive to everything, to beauty, to people. There's always this concern, the theme of the passing of time. We've seen this in Shakespeare, and we see this now. And it's repeated here. But at my back I always hear. Because at my back, this is metaphorical expression. Actually, there is no chariot. Chariot means wagon, like a car or vehicle. But this chariot is the chariot of time. Beautiful metaphor. He likens time to a car, to a train that is coming what? Very fast, because this is time. Time is rushing. So we don't have time to waste. So come live with me and be my love. Be mine. You don't have time to be shy. If you are shy now, this year, next year, the years to come, all of a sudden you will open your eyes and you are 50, 60, you are old, and your fairness, your beauty, everything, you lose. Very beautiful argumentative style. This is not a pure metaphysical poem, but there are metaphysical features. And this is the only extract we're going to study. Go to YouTube, listen to the whole poem. Really beautiful. And this is Andrew Marvell. There is a love poem here. And the personal experience, there's dramatization of this. Probably another feature is how this tiny little experience is dramatized. This could be like a sonnet, a soliloquy of Shakespeare, an internal monologue. Someone had we but enough world and time, this coin, this lady, were no crime. Could be a monologue like the ones we studied in Shakespeare. This is called dramatization. When a tiny little experience is dramatized, like John Donne always does, when in the sun rising and the sonnets we studied. Any question, any comment? You want to add something, to ask something? What do you think of the rhyme scheme? Couplets, yeah. Couplets, please. Very good. This is couplets. Generally, we'll study another poem for Marvell, and he goes for this. He likes this style, couplets. Because they became very famous later on. Let's move to another text, metaphysical text, the final text, metaphysical text for today. And it's by our friend George Herbert. Herbert is a very interesting, very good. By the way, he's a very religious poet. He wrote very beautiful religious poetry. And always remember him by the Easter Wings poem that has the shape of what that. This poem is called The Collar, and this is the collar. The collar. I don't have a collar. Anyway, this is the collar, like when you have a T-shirt and it has a collar here. There's a lot to say here, but to be brief, there's a play on word. The collar is what priests do. You know, monks, religious people in the church, they have a particular color. The color signals that they are religious. They are dedicated to God. They love God. But also a collar could be this device that you put to control animals from the necks, like dogs, or if you have a lion pet at home, that's the collar in a way. So, the collar. Again, we can't study whole poems in this course generally because this is only an introduction, a brief introduction to things. So this means there is ellipsis here. As a matter of fact, the first 2 lines and then the last final 4 lines. What do you think? Before reading, are you going to recognize this as a metaphysical poem?
Yes.
Why? The structure. The structure of the poem is unique, is different. See, we have here how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4. From 4 feet to 2 feet. And I think he goes for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 feet. Listen. A friend of yours in the other group asked me about Tamim al-Barghuti's poem في القدس. And I told her Tamim's poem is the perfect example to explain how the shape of the poem helps its meaning. Do you know how the poem begins? Someone recited the poem before here. Where is she? Is she absent? Yeah, exactly. It starts with classical poetry. مررنا على دار الحبيب فردنا عن الدار قانون الأعادي وسورها. كأنه شاعر عربي. As a classical Arab poet, you start with البكاء على الأطلال. You know, standing at the ruins and you just reminiscing and remember the good old days. فردنا عن القدس قانون الأعادي فقلت لنفسي ربما هي نعمة فماذا ترى في القدس حين تزورها. So he starts with a classical Arab poem. In a way, in my opinion, he's telling us that this is the Arab culture, the poetry, this kind of poetry, exactly as this city, Jerusalem, belongs to the Palestinians, to the Arabs. Okay? So, and probably if we want to get it back, to have it back, to struggle for it, we have to go back to our roots, to our, as proud Arabs, owners of the land, regardless of our religions here. The moment Tamim shifts from talking about Jerusalem as the city that should belong to us, Palestinians, to speak about the Zionist occupiers, the whole structure of the poem changes. So he shifts from classical to some kind of blank verse or sometimes even free verse. No rules. Because when the Israelis, like when Israel was established, they broke all the rules. They destroyed the country. They destroyed the life here. They destroyed the lives of the people, the city. So the poem itself doesn't have rules here. What does he say in the second stanza? في القدس بائع خضرة من حتى look at this very long line. في القدس بائع خضرة من جورجيا بارم بزوجته يفكر في طلاق إجازة أو في قضاء أو طلاق. So you can take a whole long circle and the line still doesn't finish. And he goes on, and almost everything is broken here because now the intruders, the occupiers are controlling the city. And now this is a religious poem by Herbert. Herbert, generally religious poetry. What's going on here? What is he saying? What is struck? What does struck mean? Struck comes from? Strike. Remember, poetry used to be cool, nice, beautiful, sweet. But now, there is a lot of drama. There's dramatization. That's the second feature. So the new form that has the meaning. Here we have a person who is what? What is he doing? He's striking the board. No, board, probably a table or this board. And what is he doing? Shouting. What is he shouting? I will abort. Look at the exclamation mark. He's angry. He's shouting. If someone is shouting, he can't control his emotions and feelings. And that's why he can't control the shape and the structure of the poem. If the poem has a well-structured form, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be, in a way, restricting. He's not going to express himself the way he should. So, I struck the board and cried, no more. I will abroad. An angry speaker, an angry poet. He hates the rules. He hates the color. He hates the fact that he's being obedient to God. He wants to get rid of this. He wants to go out, away, to free himself. Exactly like the way he's breaking the rules of decorum, the rules of poetry here. So this is connected very much to the idea. What is the poet doing? He's angry. He's shouting. He wants more freedom. He wants to free himself. And look at the longest line when he says, but as I raved and grew. This is growing. He grew angrier and angrier. More fierce and wild. I was very angry. I hated my life. At every word, methought, it's actually methought. It means it seems. I thought, it seems closer. It's a Middle English word. It's not used commonly nowadays. Methinks and methoughts. I heard one call or calling child. So he's angry because God is ignoring him. God, he's suffering. He's sacrificing many things. And God doesn't care about him. But because God is loving, God is merciful, he answers his prayer. And God says, child. And it takes only one word from God. And the poet is going back to being what? And I replied, my Lord. He's going back to God. And the way the poem started angry, this anger is clear in the choice of words, in the structure. But at the end, it ends in a calm, quiet, peaceful tone. And this is reflected on the choice of words. And I replied, I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I replied, my Lord, in a way. The fact that the poet is dealing with God as a close friend, as an intimate friend, is a metaphysical feature. Remember, battle my heart, 3% God? God is no longer, for the metaphysicals, is no longer the fearful God that people feared because they thought he's destructive and vengeful. For the metaphysicals, he is like a friend, a close friend, an intimate friend. They talk to. If you are angry, you can be angry. But you can always go back when you feel like it. This is George Herbert. Beautiful. I love how the structure, maybe I'll ask you this question in the exam. How does the structure of this reveal or reflect its meaning? Number one, the poem doesn't have a fixed structure. What is fixed? Classical structure. Like where the lines have the same length and probably the rhyme scheme. Do we have a particular rhyme scheme here? Yeah, here, but not here maybe. Wild, child, word, and Lord, they don't perfectly rhyme, but they work. So you'd say, the poet here is angry. He's nervous, he's shouting, he's crying. He wants to free himself from the color. He wants to take the color out, to throw it away, and be free. And the shape of the poem is closely connected to this. He hates the rules, so he doesn't follow them in the poetry. If he follows the rules, if he writes a poem with the same lines with the same length, it's going to be restricting. To restrict his movement, restrict his expression. So the form here, and this is a metaphysical feature. The idea comes first. The idea comes first, and then the rule. Not vice versa. The meaning is more important than the rule. So what is he doing? He's expressing his anger. Can I tell that he's angry? Yes, the choice of word, the language, the crying, and the loose form of the poem. Please.
Let us suppose that two lines have the same rhyme. Can we call them a couplet?
Here, where here?
There is no. Let us suppose that two lines have the same rhyme.
Yeah.
Can we call them a couplet, although the lines?
Generally, the strict definition of a couplet, two lines with the same rhyme, the same topic, and iambic pentameter, like 5 feet. That's the strict definition, but more or less, could be. But generally, a couplet has they talk about, the two lines talk about the same thing. Like in Shakespeare, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Like Marvell just now. Had we but enough world and time, this coyness lady would wear no crime. But basically, yeah, it's not a big deal.
Child and Lord could be imperfect rhyme.
No. Maybe, but yeah, actually this goes with this. And word goes with this. And they are, this is word and this is Lord, imperfect. But here and here, but I like the dah sound. The dah sound is in a way violent sound. Lord, child, wild, bored. There is movement here, there's action, and this action is clear in the choice of words and everything. Okay, I'll move to something else. The Cavalier poets. We'll speak briefly about these two poets, because next class, or probably the class after, we can elaborate on them. So, we're done with the metaphysicals. Very interesting poets. Now, the Cavaliers were the supporters of the king. They were close to the king. And on the other hand, we have the Puritans. Remember the Puritans, what they did to the drama? What did they do? They closed the theater. We'll see what they do next class. Spoiler alert, they execute the king for the first time. Remember, the king was only killed in Shakespeare's plays. But fiction became a reality. We'll talk about this probably next week. So if you look at this, the poetry of those people, it was generally simpler than the metaphysical poetry, and even simpler than Shakespeare and other poets. It was direct. It was much connected to life. It speaks about personal experiences, about the passing of time, about love. And more importantly, there are poems about politics, and we'll see how this develops later on. Now, political poems started to be part of the English literature because of the political turmoil and restlessness. In Herrick's poem, Counsel to Girls, Advice to Girls, sounds interesting. Maybe you can look it up. He's saying, gather ye here means you, rosebuds while you may. And by the way, this is an English proverb now. It's very famous. Gather your rosebuds while you may. You know the bud? When you have a rose that's starting to blossom, yes. The bud, the tiny little thing here. Again, this is about time. There's a concern about the passing of time here. It means that don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. Do it while you are young, while you are youthful. Don't wait, because we all age and we lose our youthfulness. But this is more beautiful to me. Can someone read the second bit by, again, the poet is Richard Lovelace. Very interesting name. You know what lace means? Shoelace? Lovelace. I don't know what that could possibly mean. To Althea from prison. Clearly, this is someone who is in prison, and this is a political poem. As Palestinians, we have a lot of prison literature. There's something called, a whole genre called prison literature. Very adab al-sujun. Different from resistance literature. But prison literature for us as Palestinians is also resistance literature generally. Because we are not imprisoned by our own government generally, although sometimes we are. It's the occupation, the colonizers. Read, please.
Stone walls do not prison make, nor iron bars a cage.
Very good. Yeah.
Stone walls do not prison make, nor iron bars a cage.
One more.
Stone walls do not a prison
nor iron bars a cage. Jindiya?
Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage.
Very good. How does this translate into Arabic? Can you translate this into Arabic? Into good Arabic? What do you think? Do you like this? Do you like? When I first read this, honestly, I thought it's something that somebody wrote just now, 20th and 21st century, because it's relevant to what we have now as Palestinians, and that's the beauty of poetry. Poetry breaks all the barriers of time and race, and that's why we love poetry, regardless of when or where. Yes. Very good. Beautiful translation. You're good with the words. Someone else has another translation? The same? Also very beautiful. Very beautiful. So, stone walls don't a prison make. Notice here, it should be don't make a prison, but that's poetic. Nor iron bars a cage. Why is this man happy in prison?
No.
Why? Why would you be like this? Yeah.
I think he's saying I'm a prisoner and I'm in prison, but I can write poetry and I'm good at poetry and I can write and I do what I want.
Okay, I like your interpretation. So as long as you write poetry, you are a free man.
It's like I'm free. Like, yeah, I can.
What, only in your poetry? What else? Thank you very much. If you are in prison because you struggle, you fight for your country, you defend your own people, your rights, you are a free person. You are a free man, you are a free woman. Even if you are in a cell with stone walls and bars, iron bars. It's the spirit that is free. And this political concern in literature will develop later on in the Commonwealth and Restoration literature. So if you want to comment on this, this is an extract from Richard Lovelace to Althea from prison, in which he's expressing a political idea, sending a political message that as long as he struggles, he fights for his country, he is a free man, no matter what happens to him. Because if he fights for others, if he defends others, if his country is free, struggling, resisting oppression and injustices, he's also a free man, even if he is in prison. Yeah.
You said that the Cavaliers are a group of people that support the king, but how does this fall? These two
We'll elaborate on this later on. Yeah, because for the first time here, there was a major division in England between two political parties. In the past, it was generally, oh, we love the Queen, oh, we love the King, sweet Thames, run swiftly till I end my song. But now, because of politics, we have political parties. So you support this political party against this political party, and then there is struggle. Because when the king was executed, those people probably will be put in prison because they still support the king by the other party.
The Puritans?
The Puritans. We'll speak about the Puritans probably next week. So I'll stop here. Does anyone have a question? So we finish. Yeah, please. So back to grammar. Yeah. Say again. Yes, in the third condition, yes. And I used this expression before. I'm not sure if you paid attention, any of you. When I spoke about Marlowe, do you remember what I said about Marlowe? The first thing I said about Marlowe. Before that, I said he died young. Before Shakespeare was starting his career, I said had he lived longer, he would have surpassed Shakespeare, according to some critics. Meaning, if he had. So sometimes I use some grammatical expressions for you to pay attention to. Thank you very much, ladies. We can continue talking about this age. Next class, we speak about prose.